Yesterday, listening to Oppong Nkrumah on News Desk, he raised some of those issues, and he's here with us. And so I'm going to allow you to talk to him and get some understanding from him. Honorable Oppong Nkrumah is the ranking on the Committee on Economy and Development. I'm going to leave you and George Jaffe to have a conversation about what your own expectation from the minority is.
So, Kojo, thank you so much for joining us on our coverage here for the budget 2025. And let me first start with you on your expectation, getting it right, ranking member on the Economic Committee. I'm right on that one. Let me first start with you on your expectation for this budget presentation.
I think there are about four major things that everybody's expecting. First is that the commitments that this administration made during the campaign period, which is then translated into what you call a social contract with the people of Ghana, will be fulfilled. They made about 273 economic promises.
You already done the count.
Well, yeah, we've gone through the manifesto, 273 economic promises. Of course, you don't expect that they'll fulfill all of it in the first year, but you want to see the foundational major ones fulfilled in this first campaign manifesto, which is translated into a budget, and you want to see at least a good count of that in this one. So everybody will be expecting that they live by their promises. Number two, we in particular in the minority are expecting that they will be truthful to the economic record of this country. And I think we've had opportunity to explain that it is important to be truthful to the economic record for various reasons. When we have time, we'll go into that one. Number three, there are everyday issues that the Ghanaian is looking forward to. Cost of living, cost of transport, fuel, etc. Unemployment in particular, funding, infrastructure, etc. that people are expecting to hear the administration respond to in this particular budget. And then number four, there are a number of things that across the divide we had agreed on before the election, particularly the fiscal consolidation strategy. And you would expect that in this budget, apart from all the rhetoric and the propaganda, you actually see the numbers reflect fiscal consolidation. These are about
Kojo, you spoke about being truthful with the numbers, but GDP data is GDP data. Fiscal deficit is fiscal deficit, and that is there for everyone to verify. Why that concern about being truthful with the data and playing with the data?
If our friends in the majority agreed with you, Felix Kwasi-Fosu, Minister of State for Government Communication, will not have issued a statement that they are calling a national economic dialogue to communicate what they call the true state of the economy. Because in the beginning, what they sought to do was to do a lot of propaganda with the economic numbers and create an impression that things were totally out of gear. You recall the president said that this economy had been criminally managed. Yet when he appeared here, because the days after that comment, the market started reacting, he pulled back. And then he said that he was leaving it for the finance minister to go to the National Economic Dialogue and provide some more detail on what they call the criminally managed economy. When the finance minister went to the National Economic Dialogue, he also pulled back. He didn't go do propaganda. He stuck to the facts. This is the third opportunity they have, and already you can hear the decibel levels going up on NDC platforms, NDC social media, that they should come and tell a very bleak story of the economy. And we have always insisted, going back to when they called the National Economic Dialogue, that if you want the facts on the Ghanaian economy, the Ghana Statistical Service will tell you. Just yesterday, they told us that post-COVID, and in 2024, we grew by 5.7%.
That's the annual growth.
Yes.
But Q4, it slowed to 3.6%.
But the year-on-year growth, which you are measuring, is 5.7. Remember, the first 3 years, we had done 7%. We took over at 3.4 from the Mahama administration at the end of 2016. And we upped growth in the economy to 7%, average 7% in the first 3 years before COVID hit us. And then we started the process of recovery. We turned it around. Now we are being told 5.7. It doesn't lie in the mouth of the finance minister to come here and say he disagrees with the Ghana Statistical Service. Yesterday, when they also told us that the GDP estimate for the year 2024 exceeded the 1 trillion Ghana cedis that we had projected.
1.2.
It was 1.2. What that means now is that your debt burden has gone down. So debt to GDP is somewhere,
the numbers are going to change.
It's going to be somewhere, if I'm right, somewhere around 61.8% if you work the math properly. So we're expecting that the minister responsible for finance will be truthful to the economic record. He should not fall prey to the hawks in his party who are asking that they should come and paint a very bleak picture, because the markets will react, they will scare away investors, and it will not even be true to the economic record. Secondly, as part of being truthful to the economic record, we are urging on him that this is a time in government where if you don't take care, all manner of persons will show up making claims of government. Government owes me this, government owes me that, government owes me that. And I'll give you two examples. In 2009, when Dr. Kwabena Dufo was finance minister, he accepted a lot of those claims and created a new line in the budget called judgment debt. And you recall how it was then exploited for create, loot, and share opportunities eventually. In fact, when the Supreme Court ruled on the Woyome matter, they explained what had happened, that people had created a phantom expenditure line, had looted it, and people had shared it. When we came in 2017, we had a lot of claims. You'll recall the press conference we had talking about the fact that some 7 billion extra was being urged on us to pay. Eventually, further validation ensured that we did not fall into that same trap. And so we are urging on him not to fall into that trap and to be truthful to the economic record of the Republic.
But some would also say that in being truthful is not all that rosy. And we're yet to get the fine details about the true situation when it comes to the deficit, the fiscal situation, and even how you fared under the fund program and then 2024. For any government that is taking over, and if the fiscal or the budget deficit is bigger than what has been estimated, that is a concern for any new finance minister to highlight.
The deficit is not estimated. It's a matter of fact. The IMF has a definition for how you come to accepting expenditure obligations of the Republic and how you program it into it. And we have all agreed on a national platform for accepting and programming it. When you go by that, those are figures that nobody will dispute. If you choose to go outside that and manufacture some numbers or listen to people who are making claims on government, then you fall into a trap where you are now coming up with something that is not a true reflection of the situation.
Let's come to expenditure. And you were on the economic committee, you've heard a lot of things. What should be the minister's plan? Or if he goes about cutting, how should these cuts be done to ensure that the expected shocks on the economy is well managed?
So I would rather say generally, across the political divide, we agreed on what we call a fiscal consolidation strategy. You recall the MPP, when we were putting our manifesto together, we spoke a lot about cutting away these three taxes. That was when people were even asking, why don't you cut the taxes now? Because
if you do now, what will you do tomorrow?
And then we answered that the budget had already been programmed for 2024. It is when we build the new fiscal framework for 2025 that we can take those taxes off. And when we said it, people didn't believe us. You notice that when the new administration came, from January 7th till now, they haven't taken it off. Why? Because there's an expenditure and advance of appropriation that they are working with. They are now bringing the new budget. So now is when you can take it off. We expect that as part of that fiscal consolidation strategy, you take off those taxes, you will reduce your reliance on financing or on borrowing, and to avoid creating a hole on the expenditure side, you will cut expenditure. So again, I take you back to the MPP's manifesto. We programmed that we're going to cut expenditure by about 3% of GDP. I keep making the point
that's huge.
Yes, looking at GDP estimates for 2024, 1% of GDP was about 10 billion. So 3% of GDP is about 30 billion. So you cut about 7 billion on the revenue side, but you cut about 30 billion on the expenditure side. That is a net of about 23 gain to the Republic. So in the fiscal consolidation strategy and the fiscal consolidation conversation we had in 2024, we came to the table that cut these three, but cut expenses to compensate. At the time, our colleagues on the other side made a lot of political capital about cut these three. And what you cut on the other side, our views that they were a bit fudgy. They said they will cut wasteful expenditure, they will rationalize expenditure.
You've been in government before and you've had a chance of engaging the former Minister of Finance. What do you make of this concern that they've raised about wasteful expenditure?
The numbers will tell. In fact, if you look at the KPMG pre-budget report, they advise that the government should move away from the conversation of wasteful expenditure because it's a very subjective, matter.
Discretionary or
everybody says expenditure is not even enough. It doesn't satisfy the purpose. When you see people complaining, our roads are not good, there's doom saw here, water is not flowing here, all of that is expenditure waiting. So if you say cut wasteful expenditure, it's subjective. And so what KPMG, for example, advises the government to do is to be definite in a cut. That is what we did in our manifesto. Dr. Bawumia was clear that we're going to cut 3% of GDP, and so you can measure it and see it in the numbers. Now, today, when they bring the projected appropriation numbers.
Yeah.
What all of us should now be doing is check the numbers. Don't be too excited that I've reduced number of ministers, I've reduced this, check the numbers. Because if, for example, I have 80 ministers and it's costing 100 million to run government machinery, and you have 60 ministers and it's costing 120 million, the numbers are exposing the fact that in rhetoric you've told us you've reduced, but in terms of the cost to the exchequer, it's gone up. So the sweetness of the pudding, like they say, is in the eating. We have to look at the numbers and then we'll see whether or not there's been a cut. We advertised a 3% cut in GDP, that's about 30 billion. Let's see what this administration will
Could you let me still pick your thought finally on revenue as well? What should be the approach and strategy? We've learned that they are going to be aggressive on compliance and also restructuring the VAT structure itself. And
that is code language for they are going to introduce VAT on new areas. What you are saying, you know, I keep making the point that...
Is that what you have picked up and you can confirm few hours to this presentation?
We have worked with the same technocrats.
New levies will be introduced, new VAT handles will be introduced.
No, I don't expect new VAT handles.
But
I don't expect...
What would the rationalization lead to?
So what I sense the government is going to do is that they are going to slap VAT on things that did not already have VAT on them, or things that we had removed VAT on because it hadn't worked in the past. The language they are using suggests to me that they won't create new taxes, but what they will do is that they will either increase the rate of some of the old taxes, something that was 1%, they'll move it to 3%, something that did not affect, or VAT that didn't affect a particular category of services, they will add it to it. But you see, that will end up going back to the original scenario of overtaxing the productive sector. The places where we removed VAT, if they go that way, the things that we removed VAT on, we removed them because there was an overtaxation of those areas. And in fact, some of those areas like financial services, if you look at insurance, etc., it was beginning to constrain the rate of growth in those financial service areas. And so we took it off. If you reintroduce it, what you are doing is that, one, you are reneging on your promise to reduce the levels of taxation. So you've taken away 3 here and you've introduced 6 at the back. That's not being honest and not being fair with the people of Ghana. Secondly, you are going to go back to the original situation of constraining growth in these areas. We think that the prudent thing to do is to stick by your word. We agreed we'll cut the taxes. Cut them. Of course, it will have a 6 to 7 billion implication on the expenditure side, but cut those expenses. Don't do what they call rationalization, wasteful. Cut it, be definite, so that in the end, the fiscal consolidation that you are claiming will be achieved.
Should it be more of a front-loaded fiscal consolidation, or it should be a gradual one, some would say?
You know, when you come to government at first, you have a lot of goodwill. That's when you have to take the difficult decisions. If you don't, as the years go by, and a lot more people start getting disappointed because their expectations have not been fulfilled, it becomes difficult to master the political will to take the tough decisions. So I'll go for front-loading any day.
Thank you. That's Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. He's a ranking
George, before you
member.
let Kojo go, I want to take his view on a few things. And it's a bullet. E-levy, should it go or should it stay?
It should go. I think we mentioned in our manifesto that if we are building the 2025 fiscal program, we'll take it away.
COVID levy.
We also mentioned same, and betting, same as well.
Those three raised concern, like Professor Bobkin, that there are behavioral issues having to do with these taxes, particularly betting tax, for which reason you must let it stay. And so where do you lean on that? Because there are those who say that the political class seem to have cowered to the political pressure that have come with some of these taxes because of how betting has become such a big issue.
You have to go back to the why. Why were these taxes introduced? So, for example, we have sin taxes, tobacco, alcohol, etc. We introduced those sin taxes, among other things, to curb uptake or growth in those areas. Is that the same for e-levy? Is that the same for COVID? Is that the same for betting? I respectfully submit that no. It was because post-2020, when there was a need to close the fiscal gap because of the shocks that we had suffered, we needed to introduce these revenue measures. And what we are saying is that having moved on from there, it's a good time to redesign the fiscal framework and take them. If it had been a scenario where the betting levy, for example, had been introduced as a sin levy or a sin tax, that argument will suffice. By the way, talking of that, go back to my brother Ato Forson's earlier position on betting taxes. When he was of the view that it should be a sin tax. And therefore, in that case, you will not expect that in this budget, they will be taking it out. We sense that they may not take it away fully. They may take away a certain component of it. We'll see what the numbers are. But if you are looking for consistency with policy arguments, we are demonstrating consistency with those policy arguments, and they are now shifting because of political pressure.
I want to take you on finally on Ghana Revenue Authority and raising revenue.
Yeah.
Almost every time the Ghana Revenue Authority in the past few years, they hit the target.
Yes.
There are those who view that we are just not setting the right target, and that there is a lot of money in the system to go after instead of setting very easy targets and then meeting them easily and thinking that we can pat ourselves at the back.
It is a conundrum that we find ourselves in. The target is set at a particular level, and very often they will tell you that they have met or they have exceeded the target. Those who share that view are right, because there's so much room, for example, in the property tax area. It is an area that we have all agreed has so much potential. It's not collected enough, and we need to do better. We tried a number of options on it. We didn't succeed. You would expect that the new administration will pay attention to that area and come up with a superior way of trying to mobilize in that area, and not necessarily increase VAT or increase taxes on some specific industries. Those are the areas that when you go, you can broaden the tax base. The last thing, we also managed to develop a very credible database that allowed you to identify people who are in the Ghanaian Republic using the National ID database, but people who you couldn't find on the tax database. And there was an effort to go after these people so that they pay their quota. That is an exercise that must continue. You don't abandon it and say you are going to increase VAT on other things. That's where to go.
Right. Thank you very much, Kojo.
Thank you,
Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, the former Minister of Information, former Minister for Works and Housing, and currently the minority spokesperson on the economy. He's raised